Maya's stomach made another angry sound as she walked slowly down the busy street. 3 days. That's how long it had been since she last ate something real. Sure, she found some old bread behind a bakery yesterday, but it was so hard she could barely chew it. The smell of food from the fancy restaurant hit her like a wave. Rosewood Restaurant. She had walked past this place so many times, always looking through the big windows at people eating amazing meals. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight she was desperate enough to do something she never thought she would do. Maya stopped at the corner and looked down at herself. Her blue dress, once her favorite, now had stains she couldn't remember getting. Her black hair was messy and needed washing. Her hands, which used to be so clean and soft, now had dirt under the nails. She barely looked like the same person. She was just 2 years ago. But hunger does strange things to people. It makes you forget about pride. It makes you do things you never imagined you would do. Taking a deep breath, Maya walked toward the outdoor seating area. Rich people sat at small tables covered with white cloths, eating food that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. The warm light from fancy lamps made everything look like a movie scene. At one table, 3 men in expensive suits were laughing loudly about something. They had loosened their ties and looked relaxed, like they didn't have a worry in the world. Their plates were still half full, but they seemed more interested in their conversation than their food. Maya's heart pounded as she approached their table. She had practiced what she would say, but now her mouth felt dry. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. The men didn't hear her. They kept talking and laughing. "Excuse me, sir," she tried again, a little louder this time. One of the men looked up with an annoyed expression, like she had interrupted something very important. "What do you want, kid?" Maya felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she forced herself to continue. "I was wondering, can I perform for a bite of food?" The words hung in the air for a moment. Then, suddenly, all 3 men burst out laughing. Not the kind of laugh you make when something is funny, but the mean kind that makes your stomach hurt. "Did you hear that?" one of them said to his friends. "She wants to perform for food." "What are you, some kind of circus act?" Another one asked, still chuckling. The third man picked up a small piece of bread from his plate and tossed it on the ground near Maya's feet. "There you go, little performer. Now dance for us." Maya stared at the bread on the concrete. Part of her wanted to pick it up and run away. She was so hungry that even that small piece looked good. But something inside her refused to bend down and take it. Other people at nearby tables had started to notice the commotion. A woman in a sparkling dress whispered something to her husband, pointing at Maya. A young couple stopped eating to watch what was happening. "What could a street kid like you possibly perform anyway?" the first man asked, leaning back in his chair like he was getting ready for a show. Maya opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, a tall man in a black uniform appeared beside their table. He had a name tag that said "Manager," and looked like he had dealt with situations like this before. "I'm sorry for the disturbance," he said to the men at the table, then turned to Maya. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't have people begging from our customers." "She wasn't begging," one of the men said with a grin. "She was offering to perform. Isn't that right, kid?" Maya nodded slowly. I just wanted to earn something to eat. I can really perform. I'm not lying." The manager, whose name tag said James, looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration. This wasn't the first time he had to deal with homeless people, but something about this girl seemed different. She was young, maybe still a teenager, and despite her messy appearance, she spoke clearly and looked him right in the eyes. "What kind of performance?" James asked, more out of curiosity than anything else. Maya looked around nervously. More people were watching now, and she could feel their eyes on her like spotlights. Through the big window of the restaurant, she could see into the main dining room, and there, in a corner near the bar, sat the most beautiful piano she had ever seen. It was black and shiny, and even from outside she could tell it was expensive. The kind of piano she used to play every day back when her life was completely different. Piano, she said quietly. I can play piano. The men at the table exploded with laughter again, even louder this time. Piano, one of them shouted. Did you hear that, James? The little beggar thinks she can play piano. That's a Steinway in there, another man said, wiping tears from his eyes. That thing costs more than my car. James looked back and forth between Maya and the piano. He had been managing this restaurant for 5 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. The piano was mainly decoration. Sometimes they had professional musicians come in for special events, but mostly it just sat there looking elegant. You want to play our piano? He asked Maya. She nodded. Yes, sir. If I could just play one song, maybe people would give me enough money to buy some food. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Other diners had left their tables to see what all the fuss was about. Some of them were holding up their phones, probably getting ready to record whatever happened next. This is ridiculous, the woman in the sparkling dress said to her husband. They should call the police. No, wait, her husband replied. This might actually be entertaining. James looked around at all the faces staring at him, waiting to see what he would do. He was thinking about his business, about his reputation, about what his boss would say if he found out he let a homeless girl play their expensive piano. But he was also thinking about the crowd. People seemed interested, even excited. And excitement was good for business. You know what? James said, making a decision that would change everything. Let's see what you've got. The crowd cheered, but it wasn't the kind of cheer you give someone you believe in. It was the kind of cheer people make when they think they're about to see someone fail in a spectacular way. Maya felt a mix of relief and terror wash over her. She had gotten what she asked for, but now she had to deliver, and she hadn't played piano in almost 2 years, not since everything in her life fell apart. As James led her toward the restaurant entrance, Maya could hear people talking behind her. This is going to be good, someone said. Poor kid has no idea what she's gotten herself into, said another voice. I'm definitely posting this online, came a third comment. Maya's hands were shaking as they walked through the front door of Rosewood Restaurant. The inside was even fancier than she had imagined, with crystal chandeliers and thick carpets that felt soft under her worn-out shoes. And there, waiting for her in the corner, was the piano. It seemed to glow under the warm lights, like it was calling to her. Maya took a deep breath and tried to remember who she used to be. Before the hunger, before the streets, before everything went wrong. She closed her eyes and thought about her, father's hands guiding hers across the keys when she was little. Okay, everyone, James announced to the growing crowd that had followed them inside. Our young friend here thinks she has what it takes to play our piano. Let's see if she's right. The laughter and whispers filled the room as Maya walked slowly toward the instrument that would either save her or break her heart completely. Maya stood in front of the beautiful black piano, and suddenly, the whole restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. But it wasn't the good kind of quiet you get before something amazing happens. It was the kind of quiet that comes before people start laughing at you. She could hear whispers all around her. People were leaning toward each other, covering their mouths with their hands as they talked about her. Some of them weren't even trying to be quiet. Look at her clothes, one woman said, not even bothering to lower her voice. When's the last time she had a shower? I feel bad for her, another person whispered, but this is just embarrassing. Maya tried to ignore them, but it was hard. She had always been sensitive to what people thought about her, even back when she had nice clothes and a warm home to go to every night. James, the manager, clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. He was smiling, but Maya could tell it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile adults use when they're trying to be polite, but don't really want to be. Ladies and gentlemen, James said in a loud voice. "We have a special treat for you, tonight." This young lady believes she has the talent to earn a meal with her performance. Some people in the crowd started clapping, but it wasn't encouraging clapping. It was the kind of clapping you do when you're being sarcastic. "What do you think she's going to play?" someone called out from the back. "Probably Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," another person answered, and everyone laughed. Maya felt her face get hot. She wanted to run away, to forget this whole crazy idea and just go back to the park where she had been sleeping. At least there, nobody expected anything from her. At least there, nobody was staring at her like she was some kind of circus animal. But then her stomach made that angry rumbling sound again, and she remembered why she was here. She was here because she was hungry. Really, truly hungry in a way that made everything else seem less important. A man near the front pulled out his phone and held it up. "This is definitely going on social media," he said to his friends. "My followers are going to love this." Wait, his friend said, also taking out his phone. "Let me start recording too. This is going to be hilarious." Soon it seemed like everyone in the restaurant had their phones out. Maya could see herself reflected in all those little screens, looking small and scared and out of place. She wondered what people would say when they watched these videos later. Would they laugh at her? Would they feel sorry for her? Would they even care? "What's your name, sweetie?" asked a woman in a fancy red dress. She was trying to sound nice, but Maya could hear the fake kindness in her voice. "Maya," she answered quietly. "And how old are you, Maya?" 19. 19, the woman exclaimed, like this was the most surprising thing she had ever heard. "Well, aren't you brave for trying this?" Maya knew that brave wasn't really what the woman meant. What she really meant was foolish or crazy or sad. But she said brave because it sounded nicer. James walked over to the piano and ran his hand along the shiny black surface. "This," he announced to the crowd, "is a Steinway Model D grand piano. It's worth about $200,000. People in the crowd gasped and whispered to each other about how much money that was. Professional musicians train for years just to get the chance to play an instrument like this, James continued. It's not a toy. It's a serious piece of equipment. Maya could tell that James was trying to make her change her mind. He was hoping that if he told her how expensive and important the piano was, she would get scared and leave. Then he wouldn't have to deal with the embarrassment of watching her fail in front of all these people. But Maya had played pianos like this before. Back when her life was different, back when she had a father who loved music more than anything else in the world, she had played instruments that were just as beautiful and just as expensive as this one. Of course, none of these people knew that. All they saw was a hungry, homeless girl who probably didn't know the difference between a piano and a keyboard. "Are you sure you want to do this?" James asked her, giving her one last chance to back down. Maya looked around the room at all the faces staring at her. Some looked curious, some looked amused, and some looked like they felt sorry for her. But none of them looked like they believed in her. "Yes," she said, and her voice was stronger than she expected it to be. "I'm sure." "All right then," James said with a shrug. "Let's see what you can do." The crowd pressed closer as Maya approached the piano bench. She could smell expensive perfume and fancy food and wine. These were smells from the world she used to live in, back when she never had to worry about where her next meal was coming from. "What do you think she'll play?" Someone whispered. "Maybe Happy Birthday," another person suggested, and several people giggled. "I bet she doesn't even know how to read music," said a man in a blue suit. Maya sat down on the piano bench and immediately noticed how different it felt from the park benches she had been sleeping on. This bench was the right height, the right width, the right distance from the keys. It felt like coming home. She lifted the cover that protected the keys, and the black and white pattern looked up at her like old friends she hadn't seen in a long time. Her hands hovered over the keys for just a moment, and she could feel her father's presence beside her, the way she used to when she was little and he would help her practice. "Take your time," someone in the crowd said, but their tone suggested they didn't really want her to take her time at all. They were getting impatient, ready for this whole thing to be over so they could go back to their expensive dinners and their comfortable lives. Maya closed her eyes and tried to block out all the noise around her. She tried to forget about the phones recording her, about the people expecting her to fail, about the fact that she hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. Instead, she thought about music. She thought about the first time her father had shown her how to make the piano sing. She thought about all the hours they had spent together, practicing scales and learning complicated pieces that most kids her age couldn't even pronounce the names of. "Is she going to play something or just sit there?" someone asked impatiently. "Maybe she's praying," another person suggested, and everyone laughed. "She's probably trying to remember how chopsticks goes," said a third voice. But Maya wasn't thinking about simple songs or children's music. She was thinking about the piece that had always been her favorite, the one her father had taught her when she was just 14 years old. It was a piece that most professional pianists found challenging, a piece that required not just technical skill, but real understanding of music. She took a deep breath and positioned her fingers over the keys. The room got a little quieter as people realized she was finally about to start playing. "Here we go," someone whispered. "This should be interesting," said another voice. Maya opened her eyes and looked down at her hands. They were still dirty, still had those rough spots from sleeping outside, but they remembered what to do. They remembered how to find each key without looking, how to move with the kind of precision that comes from years of practice. The first note rang out clear and pure, filling the restaurant with a sound that nobody had expected. It wasn't the hesitant, uncertain sound of someone who didn't know what they were doing. It was confident and strong and absolutely perfect, and that was just the beginning. The first note hung in the air like magic. It was so pure, so perfect, that for a moment everyone forgot to breathe. Maya's finger had barely touched the key, but the sound that came out was nothing like what anyone had expected. Then came the second note, and the third, and suddenly Maya's hands began to move across the keys like they had a life of their own. The piece she chose was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. It starts slowly, almost, sadly, with notes that seem to tell a story of loss and longing. Most people in the restaurant had never heard classical music this complex, but they didn't need to understand it to feel it. Maya's transformation was incredible to watch. Just moments ago, she had been a scared, hungry girl standing awkwardly in front of a crowd of strangers. Now, sitting at the piano, she looked like she belonged there. Her back was straight, her head held high, and her hands moved with the kind of confidence that comes from years and years of practice. The man who had been recording with his phone slowly lowered it, forgetting all about social media. The woman in the red dress stopped whispering to her friends and just stared. Even James, the manager, felt his mouth fall open as he realized that something extraordinary was happening in his restaurant. Maya's fingers danced across the keys, playing notes so fast that they seemed to blur together, but every single one was exactly where it should be. The music grew louder and more dramatic, filling every corner of the restaurant with sound that seemed to come from another world. A little girl at one of the tables tugged on her mother's dress. "Mommy," she whispered, "why is the music making me want to cry?" Her mother didn't answer because she was crying too. Not sad tears, but the kind of tears that come when you experience something so beautiful that your heart can't hold it all in. The businessmen who had thrown bread at Maya's feet just minutes ago sat frozen in their chairs. The man in the blue suit who had joked about her not knowing how to read music was staring at her hands like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. As the music continued, Maya seemed to disappear into it completely. Her eyes were closed now, and she swayed slightly with the rhythm, like the melody was moving through her whole body. She wasn't just playing the piano. She was having a conversation with it, telling it secrets that only music could express. The fast, dramatic section ended, and the music became soft and gentle again. This was the part that always reminded Maya of her father. He used to tell her that this section sounded like a lullaby, like someone singing to a child they loved very much. As she played these tender notes, memories flooded back to her. She remembered sitting beside her father at their old piano at home. A piano that wasn't nearly as fancy as this one, but was perfect because it was theirs. She remembered how proud he looked when she mastered a difficult passage, how he would smile and say, "That's my girl." She remembered the competitions, the recitals, the music teachers who called her a prodigy. She remembered the standing ovations, the flowers people threw on stage, the newspaper articles that called her a musical genius and the future of classical piano. But most of all, she remembered the last time she had played for her father, just 3 days before the accident that changed everything. He had been so excited about a new piece he wanted to teach her, something even more challenging than anything she had learned before. Music isn't just about hitting the right keys at the right time, he had told her that day. Music is about sharing your soul with the world. When you play, you're telling people things that words could never say. Now, as she played in this fancy restaurant for people who had laughed at her just minutes ago, Maya finally understood what her father had meant. Every note she played was telling her story. The sad parts spoke of loss and loneliness and nights spent sleeping in the cold. The angry parts expressed her frustration with a world that had forgotten her. The beautiful parts remembered all the love she had known and all the dreams she still carried in her heart. The music built to another dramatic section, and Maya's hands flew across the keys so fast that some people in the audience gasped out loud. This wasn't just technical skill, this was artistry at the highest level. This was the kind of playing that most people only heard in concert halls or on recordings by world-famous musicians. An old man near the back of the restaurant wiped his eyes with his napkin. He had been a music teacher for 40 years before. He retired, and he had never heard anything like this. He knew how difficult this piece was, knew that there were professional pianists who couldn't play it this well. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his wife. The teenage boy at the next table had stopped filming with his phone and was just listening with his mouth open. He had always thought classical music was boring, something only old people liked. But this was different. This was alive and exciting, and made him feel things he didn't even have words for. Maya's playing grew even more intense, and the piano seemed to sing under her touch. Every note was crystal clear, every phrase perfectly shaped. She played with the kind of emotion that made people forget where they were, forget about their own problems, forget about everything except the music. The woman who had called her brave, in that fake nice voice, was now staring at Maya like she was seeing a ghost. She worked for a record company and had heard thousands of musicians audition over the years. She had never heard anything like this. James, the manager, was having a hard time believing his own eyes and ears. This was the same girl who had been begging for food just 20 minutes ago. The same girl he had felt sorry for. The same girl everyone had expected to embarrass herself. But there was nothing embarrassing about this performance. This was magnificent. The music reached its climax, with Maya's hands moving so fast and so precisely that it seemed impossible. The sound filled not just the restaurant, but seemed to spill out onto the street. People walking by stopped to listen, pressing their faces against the windows to see where such incredible music was coming from. Then, gradually, the music began to slow down again. Maya played the gentle, flowing melody that brings the piece to its close, each note hanging in the air like a prayer. Her touch became softer, more delicate, as if she was afraid of breaking something precious. The last note faded away, and for a moment the restaurant was completely silent. Maya kept her hands on the keys and her eyes closed, as if she was afraid that opening them would break the spell and bring her back to the harsh reality of her situation. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then, slowly, one person started clapping, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire restaurant erupted in applause unlike anything anyone there had ever heard. People were standing up, some were crying, some were shouting, "Bravo!" like they were at the opera. Maya finally opened her eyes and looked around the room. The same people who had been laughing at her, making jokes about her, recording her for their entertainment, were now on their feet giving her a standing ovation. But Maya wasn't thinking about the applause. She was thinking about her father and how proud he would have been to hear her play like that again. She was thinking about how music had just saved her life. The applause seemed to go on forever. Maya sat at the piano, still not quite believing what had just happened. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear or hunger, but from the rush of playing again after so long. It felt like waking up from a dream. Except the dream had been the last 2 years of her life, and this was reality. People were crowding around the piano now, all talking at once. The same people who had been making jokes about her just half an hour ago were now trying to get closer to her, to touch her, to be part of whatever had just happened. "That was incredible!" someone shouted. "I've never heard anything like that in my life," said another voice. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked the woman in the red dress, and this time her interest was completely real. Maya tried to answer, but her throat felt tight. She hadn't spoken to this many people in months, and she wasn't used to being the center of attention anymore. Not like this. James, the manager, was staring at her like he had just discovered a treasure chest in his restaurant. He was already thinking about what this could mean for business, how he could advertise that a world-class pianist had performed at Rosewood Restaurant. But in the crowd of excited faces, one person stood out. She was an older woman with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing a simple black dress. While everyone else was shouting and taking pictures, she was just standing quietly, tears streaming down her face. The woman pushed gently through the crowd until she was standing right in front of Maya. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear enough for everyone around to hear. "You're Maya Chen," she said, and it wasn't a question. Maya felt her heart stop. Nobody had called her by her full name in almost 2 years. Most people on the streets just called her kid or girl or didn't call her anything at all. Hearing her real name, spoken by this stranger, made everything feel suddenly real and terrifying. "You don't remember me," the woman continued, "but I remember you. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell. I teach at the National Conservatory of Music." Maya's eyes went wide. She did remember that name, though she had tried so hard to forget everything from her old life. Dr. Hartwell had been one of the judges at the International Young Musicians Competition when Maya was 16. She had been the one who had stood up and applauded even before Maya finished playing. "You won first place that year," Dr. Hartwell said gently. "You played Chopin's Ballad No. 1, and you made a room full of professional musicians cry, just like you did tonight." The crowd around them had gotten very quiet. People were starting to realize that something important was happening, something bigger than just a homeless girl playing piano for food. "I don't understand," said the man who had thrown bread at Maya's feet. "If she's some kind of famous musician, what's she doing?" He stopped talking, probably realizing how terrible he sounded. Dr. Hartwell looked around at all the confused faces. "Maya is the daughter of Chen Wei, one of the most respected pianists in the world. She was a child prodigy, winning international competitions before most kids her age even knew what classical music was. Maya felt like she was going to be sick. She had spent 2 years trying to forget who she used to be, trying to become invisible, trying to make the pain go away. Now suddenly her past was being laid out in front of strangers like an open book. "Chen Wei," the old man who had been a music teacher repeated slowly. I remember reading about him. Brilliant pianist. But didn't he die a few years ago, Doctor? Hartwell nodded sadly. Car accident about 2 years ago. Maya was in the car with him. She looked at Maya with such kindness that it almost hurt. You were injured too, weren't you? That's why you stopped performing. Maya touched her left shoulder without thinking about it. She still had scars there from the accident, scars that reminded her every day of the worst moment of her life. She had been in the hospital for weeks, and when she finally got out, nothing was the same. Her father was everything to her, Dr. Hartwell explained to the crowd. He wasn't just her teacher, he was her best friend, her whole world. When he died, Maya disappeared from the music world completely. But where has she been? Asked the woman in the red dress. Why is she living on the streets? Maya finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. My father's family in China couldn't take care of me. They had their own problems. I was supposed to live with my aunt here, but... She paused, remembering the fights, the yelling, the way her aunt's husband looked at her like she was a burden. It didn't work out. What she didn't say was how her aunt had blamed her for the accident. How she had said that if Maya hadn't begged her father to take her to that music competition in the next city, he would still be alive. How every day in that house felt like punishment for being the daughter who lived when the father died. So you've been on your own for 2 years? Dr. Hartwell asked gently. Maya nodded. I couldn't play anymore. Every time I tried, I would think about him, and it hurt too much. I thought the music was gone forever. The businessman who had been recording everything with his phone slowly put it away. He was starting to understand that this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was someone's real life, someone's real pain. But you played tonight, Dr. Hartwell pointed out. What changed? Maya looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some looked curious, some looked sorry for her, and some just looked amazed by what they had witnessed. I was hungry, she said simply. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I was desperate. Enough to try anything. She managed a small smile. I guess my father was right. He always said that music would take care of me, no matter what happened. James, the manager, was still trying to process everything. So you're telling me that this girl is actually a famous musician? Was, Maya corrected him. I was a musician. I haven't played in 2 years. I'm nobody now. Nobody? Dr. Hartwell repeated, and her voice was firm. Maya, what you just played was extraordinary. Yes, you're out of practice. Yes, you're rusty in some places, but that kind of talent doesn't just disappear. That kind of music doesn't come from nowhere. She turned to address the crowd. What you just heard is the kind of performance that happens maybe once in a lifetime. This girl has a gift that most musicians would give anything for. The teenage boy who had been filming spoke up. So why isn't she famous? Why isn't she playing in concert halls? Dr. Hartwell sighed. Because sometimes life breaks people. Even people with extraordinary gifts. Because talent isn't enough if you don't have support, if you don't have a home, if you don't have hope. Maya felt tears starting to come, and she tried to wipe them away before anyone noticed. But it was too late. The woman in the red dress was crying too, and so was the little girl who had asked her mother why the music made her want to cry. I'm sorry, Maya said, standing up from the piano bench. I'm sorry for bothering everyone. Thank you for letting me play. It meant more to me than you'll ever know. She started to walk toward the door, thinking that now that her performance was over, it was time to go back to the park, back to her real life. But Dr. Hartwell caught her arm gently. Where are you going? She asked. Back to where I belong, Maya answered. And where is that? Maya shrugged. Nowhere, really. Anywhere that will have me for the night. Dr. Hartwell looked around the restaurant at all the people who had just witnessed something they would never forget. Then she looked back at Maya, and her eyes were bright with determination. I have a better idea, she said. Dr. Hartwell's words hung in the air like a promise. Maya looked at her with confused, hopeful eyes, afraid to believe that anything good could actually happen to her after so much pain. What do you mean? Maya asked quietly. Before Dr. Hartwell could answer, James stepped forward. The restaurant manager looked completely different now than he had an hour ago. Gone was the annoyed expression he'd worn when Maya first asked to perform. Now he looked excited, almost desperate to make things right. Miss Maya, he said, stumbling over his words a little. I had no idea who you were. What you just did in my restaurant was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. He looked around at his customers, many of whom were still wiping tears from their eyes. I've been running this place for 5 years, and I've never seen people react like this to anything. You turned my restaurant into a concert hall. Maya didn't know what to say. She was still trying to process everything that had happened. An hour ago, these people had been laughing at her, treating her like she was nothing. Now they were looking at her like she was some kind of miracle. I want to offer you a job, James continued. Not just any job. I want you to be our house pianist. You could play here every evening and I'd pay you well, really well. Plus meals, of course, and I could help you find a place to live. The offer was generous, more generous than Maya had dared to hope for when she first walked up to those businessmen's table. But before she could respond, Dr. Hartwell shook her head. That's a kind offer, James, and I can see your heart is in the right place. But Maya's talent is too extraordinary to be contained to one restaurant, no matter how nice it is. She turned to Maya, and her eyes were bright with excitement. I want to offer you something else. A full scholarship to the National Conservatory of Music. Room, board, everything paid for. You could finish your musical education, work with the best teachers in the country, perform with world-class musicians. Maya felt dizzy. The conservatory was one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. Getting accepted there was a dream that most young musicians never achieved, even with years of preparation and thousands of dollars in application fees. But, Maya said hesitantly, I haven't played in 2 years. I'm not good enough anymore. You heard me tonight. I made mistakes. My technique is rusty. Your technique is rusty, Dr. Hartwell agreed. But your musicality is still extraordinary. That can't be taught, Maya. What you have is rare. So rare that most teachers go their entire careers without seeing it even once. The woman in the red dress, who had been listening to everything, suddenly spoke up. Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. I'm Laura, and I work for Meridian Records. She pulled a business card from her purse. What I heard tonight was incredible. If you're interested, I'd love to talk to you about recording opportunities. Maya stared at the business card like it was written in a foreign language. Meridian Records was one of the biggest classical music labels in the world. She had grown up listening to their recordings, dreaming that someday her father's music might be released on their label. More people started approaching. The old man who had been a music teacher introduced himself and offered to give her private lessons. A young woman said she managed classical musicians and would love to represent Maya. Even some of the regular customers were offering help. Places to stay, job opportunities, connections to people in the music world. Maya looked around at all these faces, all these people who wanted to help her, and felt overwhelmed. 2 hours ago, she had been invisible. Now everyone wanted to be part of her story, but it was too much. Too fast. She had been alone for so long that having this many people care about her all at once felt scary. I don't know, she said, backing away from the crowd. This is all happening. So fast. I need time to think. Dr. Hartwell seemed to understand. She gently moved between Maya and the other people who were trying to talk to her. Everyone, please, she said kindly, but firmly. Maya has been through a lot tonight. She needs some space to process all of this. She turned back to Maya. Why, don't we start with something simple? Are you hungry? Maya almost laughed. With everything that had happened, she had completely forgotten about the reason she came here in the first place. Her stomach chose that moment to make a loud rumbling sound, reminding everyone that underneath all the musical genius and tragic backstory, Maya was still just a 19-year-old girl who hadn't eaten in 3 days. "Yes," she admitted, "I'm really hungry." James immediately sprang into action. "Of course! Please, sit anywhere you'd like. Order anything on the menu. Everything is on the house." Maya found herself seated at a quiet table near the window, with Dr. Hartwell sitting across from her. James brought over the menu, but Maya couldn't focus on the words. Everything seemed surreal, like she was watching someone else's life happen to her. "Start with something simple," Dr. Hartwell suggested gently. "Your stomach has been empty for a while. You don't want to make yourself sick." Maya ordered soup and bread, the kind of simple meal she had been dreaming about for days. When it arrived, she ate slowly, trying to make it last. Each spoonful was warm and comforting, and for the first time in months, she felt like maybe things could get better. As she ate, Dr. Hartwell told her about the conservatory, about the other students there, about the concerts and master classes and opportunities that would be available to her. But she didn't pressure Maya to make a decision. She just painted a picture of what life could be like. "I knew your father," Dr. Hartwell said quietly. "Not well, but we met at several competitions over the years. He was so proud of you, Maya. He used to say that you didn't just play music, you spoke it like a native language." Maya set down her spoon. "He wanted me to audition for your school when I turned 18. We were planning it together before." She couldn't finish the sentence. "He would want you to have this chance," Dr. Hartwell said softly. "You know that, don't you?" Maya nodded, tears starting to fall again. But these weren't sad tears. They were the kind of tears that come when you realize that maybe, just maybe, your story isn't over yet. Over the next few weeks, Maya's life changed completely. Dr. Hartwell helped her find a small apartment near the conservatory and enrolled her in classes. The story of her performance at Rosewood Restaurant had spread quickly, and soon Maya found herself featured in newspaper articles and music magazines. But the real change wasn't in the attention or the opportunities. The real change was that Maya was playing music again, really playing, with all the passion and joy she had felt before her father died. 3 months later, Maya gave her first official recital at the conservatory. The concert hall was packed, with many of the people from the restaurant sitting in the front row. James was there, beaming with pride like a father. Dr. Hartwell sat with tears in her eyes. Even some of the businessmen who had originally laughed at Maya had come to hear her play. As Maya walked onto the stage, she looked up at the balcony and could almost see her father sitting there, smiling down at her. Before she began to play, she spoke to the audience. 2 years ago, I thought my music had died with my father. 3 months ago, I was so hungry and desperate that I was willing to humiliate myself just for a chance to eat. Tonight, I'm here because music never really dies. It just waits for the right moment to save us." She sat down at the piano and began to play the same piece she had played that night at the restaurant. But this time, it sounded different. This time, it sounded like hope. In the audience, people wiped away tears and marveled at the journey that had brought them all together. A simple request for food had turned into something beautiful, something that reminded everyone that talent and kindness and second chances could create miracles. After the concert, Maya started a program to teach music to homeless youth, proving that sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones with the most to give. Above the piano in the community center where she taught, she hung a simple sign that read, "Music fed my soul before it fed my body." And every time she played, Maya remembered that night at Rosewood Restaurant when she learned that sometimes you have to lose everything before you can find yourself again.